The rain battered the windows of our Brooklyn apartment, a relentless drumbeat that matched the storm raging in my chest. I stood frozen, clutching the edge of the kitchen counter, as Caleb's voice low, jagged, and unmistakably alpha cut through the air like a blade. Elliot, how could you do this to us? 3 months ago, I thought I'd found my forever. Caleb, my husband, my alpha, had been my anchor in a world that often felt too sharp for an omega like me. His scent cedarwood and steel had once promised safety, but now it was a reminder of the trust we'd lost. I turned to face him, my heart pounding, the pregnancy test still warm in my pocket. I didn't do anything. I whispered, but my voice broke, betraying the fear I'd fought to hide. Caleb's eyes, usually warm like molten amber, were cold, narrowed with suspicion. He stood across the room, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his alpha presence overwhelming in our small space. Don't lie to me, Elliot. You're pregnant, and we both know I've been careful. So, whose is it? His words landed like a punch, stealing my breath. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him see the truth. But the accusation hung between us, heavy and unyielding. We'd met 2 years ago at a crowded Manhattan bookstore, our hands brushing over the last copy of a dog-eared poetry collection. I was a barista with dreams of becoming a writer. He was a firefighter, all muscle and quiet strength, the kind of alpha who didn't need to flaunt his dominance. Our bond was instant. Electrica faded connection that felt like it could defy the world. 6 months later, we were married, promising to face life's chaos together. But chaos had a way of finding us. The trouble started when I began feeling sick nausea, exhaustion, a strange warmth in my core that I couldn't explain. I'd always been cautious, tracking my cycles, knowing the risks of being an omega in a society that still judged us harshly. Caleb and I had agreed to wait before starting a family, to build our lives first. So when the doctor confirmed I was pregnant, I was overjoyed but terrified. I'd planned to tell Caleb that night, to surprise him with the news that we were going to be parents. But before I could, he found the test in the bathroom trash. You think I cheated? I asked, my voice trembling as I stepped toward him. The rain outside grew louder, a roar that couldn't drown out the hurt in my chest. Caleb, it's yours. I swear it's yours. He shook his head, his jaw tight. We use protection, Elliot. Every time. You expect me to believe this is some miracle. His voice cracked, revealing a flicker of pain beneath his anger. I trusted you. I gave you everything. The words stung, but what hurt more was the doubt in his eyes. Caleb wasn't just my husband. He was my home. Losing him would be like losing the air I breathed. I reached for his hand, but he pulled away, his scent spiking with agitation. I need proof, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I need a DNA test. The suggestion hit me like a slap. A DNA test. To prove the child growing inside mere child was his. I wanted to fight, to yell, but the weight of his mistrust crushed me. I nodded, tears burning my eyes. Fine. If that's what it takes. The next week was a blur of silence and distance. Caleb slept on the couch, his firefighter shifts giving him an excuse to avoid me. I spent my days at the coffee shop, pouring lattes and dodging questions from coworkers about my pale face and red-rimmed eyes. At night, I'd lie awake, my hand resting on my stomach, whispering to the life inside me. Your dad loves you, I'd say, hoping it was still true. He's just scared. The test was scheduled at a clinic in Queens, a sterile place that smelled of antiseptic and regret. Caleb drove us there, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. We didn't speak, but I could feel his turmoil, his alpha instincts warring with his doubt. I wanted to reach for him, to bridge the gap, but fear held me back. What if the test didn't change his mind? What if I lost him forever? In the waiting room, I stared at the posters about prenatal care, my heart aching with a mix of hope and dread. Caleb sat beside me, his knee bouncing, his scent a tangled mess of cedar and unease. When the nurse called my name, I stood, but Caleb grabbed my wrist, his touch gentle despite everything. Elliot, he said, his voice raw. I want to believe you. I do. Then why don't you? I asked, my voice breaking. He didn't answer, and I walked into the exam room alone. The procedure was quick, a simple swab and a blood draw, but it felt like a trial. The nurse, a kind Omega with tired eyes, patted my shoulder. It'll be okay, she said, but I wasn't sure I believed her. The results would take a week, she told us, and in that week, I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for my life to either shatter or mend. Back at home, the silence between us grew heavier. Caleb tried to act normal, cooking dinner or asking about my day, but his eyes never met mine. I caught him staring at my stomach sometimes, a flicker of wonder in his gaze before the doubt crept back in. I wanted to scream that I loved him, that I'd never betray him, but words felt useless against the wall he'd built. One night, unable to sleep, I found him sitting on the fire escape, the city lights glittering below. His broad shoulders were hunched, his head in his hands. I stepped outside, the cool air biting my skin. Caleb, I said softly, sitting beside him. Talk to me. He didn't look up. I don't know how to do this. Elliot, if it's not mine, I don't know if I can stay. My heart stopped. And if it is yours? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He finally met my eyes, his gaze raw and vulnerable. Then I'm the biggest idiot in the world. I wanted to hold him, to promise everything would be okay. But the weight of his words kept me still. We sat there, the city humming below us, two broken pieces trying to find their way back together. The test results were coming, and with them, the truth. But would it be enough to save us? The days crawled by, each one a test of endurance. I threw myself into work, steaming milk and scribbling poetry on napkins to keep my mind from spiraling. Caleb's shifts at the fire station grew longer. Or maybe it just felt that way because he was avoiding me. Our apartment, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt like a battlefield. Every glance a potential landmine. I'd catch myself touching my stomach, whispering to our baby, promising a future I wasn't sure I could deliver. The call from the clinic came on a Tuesday. The sky outside a dull gray that matched my mood. My hands shook as I answered. The nurse's voice calm but distant. Mr. Harper, the results are ready. You can come in today. I thanked her, my throat tight, and texted Caleb. He didn't reply, but an hour later, he was at the door, his firefighter jacket still smelling of smoke. We drove to Queens in silence, the radio off, The hum of the engine, the only sound. I kept my eyes on the passing buildings, afraid to look at him, afraid of what I'd see. When we arrived, the same nurse greeted us, her smile softer this time. She handed me an envelope, its weight heavier than it should have been. "Take your time," she said, leaving us in a small, private room. Caleb stood by the window, his back to me, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. I opened the envelope, my fingers trembling, and scanned the page. The words blurred for a moment, but then they came into focus. Paternity confirmed. Probability, 99. 9%. My breath caught, relief flooding me like a tidal wave. It was his. Our baby was his. "Caleb," I said, my voice shaking. "Look at this." He turned, his face unreadable, and took the paper from my hands. His eyes moved over the results, and I watched the tension in his shoulders melt, replaced by something softer, something broken. He sank into a chair, the paper slipping from his fingers. "Elliot," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry." I wanted to be angry, to yell at him for doubting me, for tearing us apart. But all I could feel was relief, mingled with the ache of everything we'd lost in those weeks of doubt. I knelt in front of him, taking his hands in mine. "It's yours, Caleb. It's always been yours." He looked at me, his eyes wet, his alpha strength crumbling. "I was scared," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "I thought I'd lost you. I thought you'd found someone else. Someone better." "There's no one else," I said, my voice fierce. "There's never been anyone else." He pulled me into his arms, his scent enveloping me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt safe again. But even as we held each other, I knew it wasn't over. The test had proved the truth, but it couldn't erase the hurt, the nights spent apart, the words we couldn't take back. We had a baby coming, and we had to find a way to rebuild. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance. Caleb tried to make amends, cooking my favorite meals, leaving notes on the fridge, holding me a little longer each night. But trust is a fragile thing, and ours was still bruised. I'd catch him watching me, guilt in his eyes, and I'd wonder if he still saw the shadow of his doubt. I wanted to forgive him, to move forward, but part of me was still angry, still hurt. One evening, as we sat on the couch, a documentary about wildfires playing in the background, Caleb took my hand. "Elliot, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low. "When I thought the baby wasn't mine, it wasn't just jealousy. It was fear. My dad walked out when I was a kid, left my mom because he didn't trust her. I swore I'd never be like him. But when I saw that test, it brought it all back." I squeezed his hand, my heart aching for the boy he'd been, the man he was trying to be. "You're not him," I said. "You're here. You're trying." "But I hurt you," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to fix it." I leaned against him, my head on his shoulder. "We fix it together," I said. "For us. For our baby." That night, we talked for hours, peeling back layers of fear and pain we'd buried too long. Caleb told me about his childhood, the weight of being an alpha in a world that expected him to be unbreakable. I told him about my own fears, the pressure of being an omega, The judgment we faced from a society that still didn't fully understand us. It wasn't a cure, but it was a start. As my pregnancy progressed, Caleb became my shadow, hovering protectively, his alpha instincts in overdrive. He'd bring me tea when I was nauseous, read baby books aloud, even sing off-key lullabies to my growing belly. I started to see the man I'd fallen in love with again, the one who'd made me believe in forever. But the world outside our apartment wasn't as kind. At the coffee shop, whispers followed my customers and co-workers alike, their eyes lingering on my stomach, their voices low with speculation. Omegas were still rare, and pregnant omegas even rarer, especially in a place like Brooklyn where tradition clashed with progress. One regular, an older alpha with a permanent scowl, muttered something about unnatural bonds as I handed him his coffee. I forced a smile, but inside, I was shaking. Caleb noticed the change in me, the way I'd tense when we went out, the way I'd check my reflection, worried my pregnancy was too visible, too vulnerable. "You don't have to hide," he told me one night, his hands cupping my face. "You're beautiful. You're ours." I wanted to believe him, but the world felt like it was closing in. And then, one day, it did. It was a chilly October afternoon when everything unraveled. I was at the coffee shop, wiping down tables, when a group of alphas walked in, their scents heavy with aggression. They weren't regulars, but I recognized their type: men who wore their dominance like a badge, who saw omegas as lesser, as property. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head, leaned over the counter, his eyes raking over me. "Heard you got yourself in trouble," he said, smirking. "Whose pup is that?" "Huh?" I froze, my hand tightening around the rag. "It's my husband's," I said, my voice steady despite the fear curling in my gut. The other customers went quiet, sensing the tension. The alpha laughed, a cruel sound that made my skin crawl. "Sure it is," he said. "Omegas like you always have a story." I wanted to run, to hide, but I stood my ground, my omega instincts screaming to protect the life inside me. Before I could respond, the door swung open, and Caleb was there, his firefighter jacket still on, his scent spiking with fury. He'd been picking me up from work more often, worried about me being alone. Now, his eyes locked on the alpha, and I saw the moment his control snapped. "Back off," Caleb growled, stepping between us, his alpha presence filling the room. The other alpha didn't back down, his smirk widening. "What's the matter, hero? Can't keep your omega in line?" What happened next was a blur. Caleb lunged, the two alphas clashing in a flurry of fists and snarls. I screamed for them to stop, but the other customers were already pulling them apart, the shop erupting into chaos. By the time the police arrived, Caleb had a split lip, and the other alpha was nursing a bruised jaw. I was shaking, my hands cradling my stomach, terrified for our baby. The police let Caleb go with a warning, but the incident left a mark. That night, as we sat in our apartment, Caleb's head in my lap, I realized how much we'd both been carrying. The world didn't understand user love, our bond, our family. But we had to be stronger than their hate. For our child. For each other. "I'm sorry," Caleb said, his voice muffled against my thigh. "I should have protected you better." "You did," I said, running my fingers through his hair. "You're here. That's enough. But it wasn't just the outside world we had to face. Caleb's guilt still lingered, a shadow that crept into our quiet moments. He'd apologized 1,000 times for doubting me, but I could see it in his eyes, the fear that he'd failed me, that he wasn't enough. I knew I had to let go of my own anger, to forgive him fully, if we were going to move forward. One night, as snow fell outside, I found the courage to try. I pulled out the ultrasound photo we'd gotten the week before, the tiny shape of our baby clear against the grainy black and white. I placed it in Caleb's hands, my fingers brushing his. "This is us," I said. "All three of us. We're a family, Caleb. No matter what anyone says, no matter what we've been through." He looked at the photo, his eyes shining. Then he sank to his knees, his forehead resting against my stomach. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Either of you." I knelt beside him, pulling him into my arms. "You do," I said. "You always have." In that moment, something shifted. The weight of the past months, the doubt, the fear, the pain began to lift. We weren't perfect, and the world wasn't kind, but we had each other. And as I felt our baby kick, a tiny flutter of life, I knew we'd be okay. Months later, when our daughter was born, she came into the world with Caleb's eyes and my stubborn heart. We named her Hope, a promise to ourselves and to her. The whispers didn't stop, and the world didn't change overnight, but we learned to face it together. Caleb became the father I always knew he could be, fierce and gentle, his love a shield against the storm. And as I watched him cradle Hope, his scent mingling with hers, I realized that love wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other, every day, through the doubt and the fear and the joy. We'd been tested, broken, and rebuilt, stronger for it. Our story wasn't a fairy tale, but it was ours, messy, beautiful, and true.